On a quiet night in September 1983, while most Americans slept under the false comfort of peace, one man sat in a concrete bunker deep inside the Soviet Union, staring at a glowing screen that told him the world was about to end. 5 nuclear missiles, it said, had been launched from the United States. According to every protocol written by military strategists, mathematicians, and politicians, he had minutes, perhaps seconds, to trigger a response that would incinerate half the planet. Instead, he did something no system had planned for. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, history silently changed. The story begins not in Washington or New York, but in a place few Americans have ever heard of. Serpukhov 15, a top-secret Soviet early warning command center hidden in the forests south of Moscow. The year was 1983, one of the most dangerous years of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a psychological and military standoff that had lasted nearly 4 decades, but tensions had recently escalated to terrifying levels. In March of that year, U.S. President Ronald Reagan had delivered a speech that stunned Soviet leadership. He referred to the USSR as an evil empire and announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, quickly nicknamed Star Wars, a plan to develop space-based missile defenses. To American audiences, it sounded like a bold technological leap. To Soviet generals, it sounded like preparation for a first strike. Just weeks later, a Soviet fighter jet shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007 after it strayed into restricted airspace. All 269 people on board were killed, including a U.S. congressman. The incident shocked the world and hardened attitudes on both sides. In the United States, headlines painted the Soviet Union as ruthless and reckless. In Moscow, leaders believed the U.S. was using the tragedy to justify future aggression. By September, paranoia had reached a fever pitch. NATO was preparing for a large military exercise called Able Archer 83, designed to simulate nuclear war procedures. Soviet intelligence feared it could be cover for a real attack. Both sides had thousands of nuclear warheads aimed at each other, many on hair-trigger alert. Into this volatile moment stepped Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Yevgrafovich Petrov, a 44-year-old officer in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. Petrov was not a famous general or a powerful politician. He was a systems analyst by training, an engineer who understood the mathematics and logic behind the machines he worked with. That background would prove crucial. On the night of September 26, 1983, Petrov was the duty officer at Serpukhov 15. His job was straightforward in theory, but unimaginably heavy in reality. Monitor the Soviet Union's new satellite-based early warning system, known as OKO, designed to detect U.S. missile launches. If the system confirmed an attack, Petrov was required to immediately report it up the chain of command, triggering a potential nuclear retaliation. Shortly after midnight, alarms shattered the bunker's routine hum. A red warning flashed on the screen. The computer declared with high confidence that a U.S. intercontinental ballistic missile had been launched from a base in Montana. Sirens wailed. The word launch glowed in bold letters. Petrov felt his heart race. According to protocol, he was supposed to notify his superiors immediately. The Soviet leadership would have only minutes to decide whether to respond before the missile or missiles reached Soviet territory. Then the system detected a second missile, then a third, then a fourth, then a fifth. 5 missiles, the computer insisted, were on their way. To many officers, this would have been confirmation enough. The system was designed by top scientists and engineers. It had been approved by the highest authorities. Human error, the doctrine said, was more dangerous than machine error. But Petrov hesitated. He later described the moment as surreal. Everything he had trained for told him to act. The alarms were screaming. The screen was glowing red. His subordinates were staring at him, waiting for orders. The fate of millions, perhaps billions, hung on his decision. And yet something felt wrong. Petrov reasoned that if the United States were going to launch a nuclear first strike, it wouldn't start with just 5 missiles. A real attack would involve hundreds, overwhelming Soviet defenses and command structures. 5 missiles made no strategic sense. There was another problem. The satellite system was new. It had not been fully tested under real-world conditions. Petrov knew its limitations better than most because He had helped analyze its design. The satellites detected missile launches by spotting infrared light from rocket exhausts. Under certain rare conditions, sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds could potentially confuse the sensors. The ground-based radar systems, which could confirm an actual incoming missile,